The Army of Northern Virginia and the Army of the Potomac had clashed in the Battle of Antietam. After the day, which would include the single bloodiest day in the Civil War, Lee's rebel army was pushed back over the Potomac and back into Virginia. This would end Lee's recruitment campaign into Maryland and would mark one of the first turning points in the war for the Union. However, after repulsing Lee's attack, General McClellan, leader of the Union forces, held back from striking a final blow in an attempt to keep the Union Army intact. This was a critical mistake by McClellan and led to his replacement as commander of the Union Army by Ambrose Burnside. Burnside was not in favor of his appointment, as he knew his limits as a commander and felt unfit to lead the whole Army of the Potomac. However, he accepted the position under pressure from Lincoln and to prevent an even unworthier fit man from taking control.
Well, one of the more famous names for the Union at the time is going to be General Burnside. He was a personal friend of General McClellan, and he took the command reluctantly. He had been offered the command earlier in the war and had refused it because he felt that he was an unfit commander for field command. And he has only reluctantly taken the reins now.
He, unlike McClellan, led the army into Virginia in pursuit of the rebel forces. Under his command, Burnside had a few notable names, including Major General Sumner, in charge of the Right Grand Division, Major General Franklin, in charge of the Left Grand Division, Major General Hooker, leader of the Center Grand Division, and Major General George Meade, future commander of the Army of the Potomac. In Virginia, Burnside was moving with great speed towards the Confederate capital of Richmond and the city of Fredericksburg, against the divided Confederate forces led by Robert E. Lee.
On the southern side, you have, of course, Robert E. Lee, who he took command of overall Confederate forces back in May of 1862, and he really reversed the tide for the Confederates, and he's been bringing victory upon victory for the Confederate cause.
Under his command, he also had some notable names. These included Lieutenant General Stonewall Jackson, leader of a corps, Lieutenant General Longstreet, leading another corps, and Sergeant Kirkland, known as the Angel of Marye's Heights. He was known as such, for during the battle there was a lull in the fighting, and Kirkland saw all the wounded Union soldiers moaning in pain on the hillside in front of him. He ventured into the open area to tend to the wounded. As he did this, he came under heavy Union fire until they realized what he was doing and allowed him to continue his work. His bravery inspired a monument in his memory. As Burnside marched towards Fredericksburg, Lee tried to regroup his scattered army. However, the Union forces had to cross the Rappahannock River, and the civilian bridges had been burned earlier in the war. This called for the use of floating pontoons, which were promptly ordered and belatedly delivered. Burnside's strategy was to cross the Rappahannock unopposed and occupy the city of Fredericksburg. This would allow the Union Army a supply line on the march towards Richmond. He then reorganized his troops into 3 grand divisions. Burnside had no real strategy upon entering the battle because he was trying to avoid a fight around the city and take Richmond and fight there. Lee, on the other hand, rushed to Fredericksburg to force a fight on his own terms. He dug in on a hill overlooking the city called Marye's Heights. This would provide the perfect vantage point for raining fire down upon advancing Union troops. He ordered Longstreet to place his corps on the heights when they arrived on November 19th. Jackson, arriving about a week later, was deployed down the river to prevent Union forces from crossing the river into the city.
On November 18th, the day after Burnside arrives, General Longstreet, who commands one of Lee's corps, the 1st Corps, will arrive in Fredericksburg and take command of the heights around Fredericksburg, known as Marye's Heights. Burnside will then sit and wait until he gets his pontoons ready. That will take another 10 days. At the end of November, November 30th to be exact, General Stonewall Jackson arrives and reinforces Lee's right flank. Again, the armies will sit and they will stare at each other for another 10 days while Burnside gets ready. In the meantime, this is giving Robert E. Lee just what he loves. It gives him a chance to entrench around the high ground around the city, to build fortifications, and to ready themselves for an attack that will be thrown at them.
By the time Burnside's pontoons arrived on November 25th, so too had the rebel army. After crossing the river, Burnside planned on separating his 3 grand divisions and attacking the Confederate forces on Marye's Heights while holding off Jackson's forces and attacking if there was an opening. His stubbornness to take Marye's Heights would be his downfall.
Well, the advantage for the Army of the Potomac was, of course, sheer size. They had 122,000 men at Fredericksburg ready for battle. So they had a superior force. They will have superior weapons. They will have almost an unlimited supply of ammunition. Their surprise, their strength would have been in moving into Fredericksburg immediately. If they had been able to cross on the 17th, they would have been able to take the heights before Longstreet could have had them. They give up that initiative by sitting and waiting for another 10 days, and by that point, the Confederates have the high ground. You're going to have to take it from them.
Lee's plan was to have Longstreet cover the north, while Jackson covered the south. Lee then held strategic strongpoints in the area, including Marye's Heights, with cannon while lying infantry in a sunken road below. He established a 7-mile line that would force the Union to charge across open fields. On the Union side, Stafford Heights allowed the Army to set up artillery positions on the heights and rain fire down any attacking Confederates and the entrenched Confederates. This was part of the reason Lee chose to go on the defense. Another reason was of the creek that also ran behind Fredericksburg that would bog down Union forces as they tried to cross the plains beneath the Confederate stronghold above Marye's Heights.
What it's going to be really famous for is the fact that the Union is going to have to throw assault upon assault upon assault against the heights, not giving up, continuing to fighting, and it's really going to start to prove that frontal assaults just don't work anymore in the modern age of the Civil War.
This, along with the Rappahannock River, allowed Lee to trap the Union forces.
As Burnside ordered the completion of his 2 bridges, the 2 New York regiments who were assigned to complete the structures were met with stiff resistance. Confederate infantry opened fire across the river from the cover of Fredericksburg's houses, slowing the Union effort and making it nearly impossible to complete the task. In response, Burnside ordered a massive Union retaliation. 150 Union cannon opened fire on the city for almost 2 hours. The artillery divisions, under the command of General John Hunt, unleashed approximately 8,000 rounds into the city, wreaking a path of destruction and providing cover for the engineers while they set about their work. It was a fearsome display of United States firepower, a vicious bombardment that had Burnside convinced that he would be able to move upon the city with greater confidence. After all, Union command decided, there was no chance that rebel forces could sustain that fierce of a concentrated assault. They were wrong. As the bombardment ended, the remaining engineers moved towards the ends of their nearly finished projects. Confederate muskets immediately reopened fire on the infantry, seemingly unaffected by the cannon fire that had torn through the city. At a loss for a solution, General Burnside ordered volunteers to ferry themselves across the river using the pontoon boats. Under heavy fire, Union forces battled the Mississippi Regiment holding the river street by street and block by block. By the night's end, the Army of the Potomac had entered the city, though they had taken high casualties. How near we came to accomplishing our object, future reports will show. But for the fog and unexpected and unavoidable delay in building the bridges, which gave the enemy 24 hours more to concentrate his forces in his strong positions, we would almost certainly have succeeded, in which case the battle would have been, in my opinion, far more decisive than if we had crossed the places first selected. As it was, we came very near success. Failing in accomplishing the main object, we remained in order of battle 2 days, long enough to decide that the enemy would not come out of his strongholds and fight us with his infantry. After which we recrossed to the side of the river unmolested and without the loss of men or property. As the day broke, our long lines of troops were seen marching to their different positions as if going on parade. Not the least demoralization or disorganization existed. To the brave officers and soldiers who accomplished the feat of this recrossing, in the face of the enemy, I owe everything. For the failure in the attack, I am responsible, as the extreme gallantry, courage, and endurance shown by them was never excelled, and would have carried the points had it been possible. Ambrose Burnside. Yet the battle was just beginning. Burnside moved to take the city by utilizing a 3-pronged attack. Each division would assault a different unit of the Confederate Army, with the main assault being led against James Longstreet and Marye's Heights. Major General Franklin led the initial attack to the south against General Lee on Prospect Hill, and the majority of Union troops staged their attack while Franklin's flanking maneuver began. Meanwhile, the assault on Jackson's troops on the right flank seemed like it would lead to Union victory, but the attackers suffered from a lack of reinforcements, and a quick counterattack by Jackson led to the decisive victory for the South on this section of the battlefield. High casualties were sustained by both sides, over 9,000 killed, wounded, and missing in total. While these flanking maneuvers were occurring, the engagement began at Marye's Heights. The Yankee attackers met no success. Burnside's attack force was slaughtered by entrenched Confederate positions. Wave after wave of U.S. troops advanced to take the position, but were cut down by Southern rifles and cannon. Of the 12,600 Union casualties at Fredericksburg, 2/3 of those were lost at Marye's Heights.
On the night of the 10th instant, the enemy commenced to throw 3 bridges over the Rappahannock, 2 at Fredericksburg, and a third about 1 1/4 miles below near the mouth of the Deep Run. The plain on which Fredericksburg stands, so completely commanded by the hills of Stafford, in possession of the enemy, that no effectual opposition could be offered to the destruction of the bridges or the passage of the river without exposing our troops to the destructive fire of his numerous batteries. Positions were therefore selected to oppose the advance after crossing. The narrowness of the Rappahannock, its winding course and deep bed, afforded the opportunity for the construction of bridges at points beyond the reach of our artillery, and the banks had to be watched by skirmishers. The latter, sheltering themselves behind the houses, drove back the working parties of the enemy at the bridge opposite the city. But the lowest point of the crossing, where no shelter could be had, our sharpshooters themselves were driven off, and the completion of that bridge was effected about noon on the 11th. General Robert E. Lee, Commanding General of the Army of the Northern Virginia.
The South had lost less than half that number, at approximately 5,300. The defeat at Fredericksburg was a major blow to Union morale, and would lead to Burnside's removal from command and replacement by General Hooker. This battle would lead to the Battle of Chancellorsville, which would also be a major battle of the war. Commenting on the Confederate victory, General Robert E. Lee stated, "It is well that war is so terrible, or we should grow too fond of it."